Hello, my name is Jeff Fischer, and today I will be talking about the mental illness and the yellow wallpaper. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper is a short story of a woman who is secluded and undermined by her physician, also her husband, due to what he has diagnosed as a nervous condition with a hysterical tendency. He takes her to a summer home, which the young woman, her name is never mentioned in the story, believes is to be haunted. In order to isolate her from extended social situations and exert his dominance over her because of his perception of her mental illness, Charlotte Perkins Gilman herself was under the care of a physician for her own mental health needs. And the yellow wallpaper is believed to be her warning to women of her time to be cautious of whom they sought care from. Gilman clarified her reason for writing the yellow wallpaper by saying, "It was not intended to drive people crazy, but to save people from being driven crazy." And it worked. The narrator of the yellow wallpaper begins her story by describing her grimed situation in marriage and how uncomfortable she is staying in the summer home. Her husband seems to dismiss her every concern, and such as when the narrator says, "There's something strange in the house, I can feel it. I even said so to John one evening." But he said that it was a drought, and shut the window. It was a simple draft, no big deal. However, it is almost as if Gilman wants you to think that the narrator is a little, paranoid, I guess. She seems to ramble and cautiously bring up things that she has already discussed. On the other hand, the fact that she is a married woman who is forced to keep a journal to release her feelings and even hides that journal from her own husband and his sister hints at the fact that she probably is not nearly as mentally ill as her husband makes her out to be. Their narrator says, "I get unreasonably angry with her, John, sometimes. I'm sure it's, due to this nervous condition that she has." This implies that she is trying to rationalize behavior that may not or may be abnormal. But her physician, also known as her husband, has assured her that a well person would not believe in this matter. She writes, "John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there's no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. So pretty much it's good enough for him." What he says goes in this book. As the narrator continues, she comes to her description of the yellow wallpaper itself, which seems to represent her own life and mental state. She describes it as one of those sprawling patterns committing every artistic sin. The color is almost revolting. Her husband agrees that the wallpaper is horrible and should be replaced, but just for long enough to confuse his wife, he then changes his mind, citing his reasons as not being good to give into his wife's fantasies, I guess she's having, because of her own mental state. She's disgusted with her current situation, and the wallpaper is a constant reminder that there is nothing she can do to change it. Her husband has complete and control of her every move inside that house. He controls her life. As time passes, the narrator begins to become obsessed with the wallpaper. She has much free time on hands and absolutely nothing to fill it with. And her husband is totally emotional and unavailable and insensitive for her true needs. So, it is perfectly reasonable that she would succumb to the nervous breakdown that she is having. She says of her days in nursery, "The effort is getting to be greater than the relief. I am awfully lazy and lie down ever so much." She begins to see a woman in the wallpaper who is trying to escape and begins to analyze her every move. It seems as though the narrator either was not mentally ill or was only slightly mentally ill at the story's beginning. And it was her husband's diagnosis that the treatment, her perceived illness, that actually drove her to this extreme mental state. Davidson describes it as a cunning method, a little cunning or not, ultimately engineered by her creator. Underpins the narrator's discreet descent into madness. The narrator also mentions that if she does not make some serious progress towards recovery in a timely manner, her husband will force her to be seen by Dr. Weir Mitchell. And Dr. Weir Mitchell and her husband are good buddies, and they think exactly the same. Was as very real of a person. Charlotte Perkins Gilman was a patient of his. She was under his care for what was probably just about of depression, but his rest cure, which is also shown in this story quite a bit, which is the treatment for which John forces the narrator to undergo, isolation and basically no actual treatment, ultimately drove Gilman to the same fate as the narrator. A nervous breakdown. The narrator tells the horrors that she herself has had about Dr. Mitchell. I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he is just like John, my brother, only more so. That is what John's wife or sister said. The Yellow Wallpaper is what Johnson calls Gilman's brilliant revenge on her evil practitioner, making his unethical medical procedures known to all the women of the world. The Yellow Wallpaper has a tragic yet somewhat comforting ending. The narrator has spent the entire story describing the suffering she is enduring while she is isolated in the attic, and while her marriage implodes due to her husband's emotional unavailability. And finally, in the end, she succumbs to the mental state in which her husband has ascribed to her long ago. She has spent weeks on end in the nursery with nothing to do, and now she can occupy her days with the woman she sees in the wallpaper. Her husband, who has a sudden realization of the consequences of his own actions, faints in despair, while the narrator continues to creep around the nursery. It is not, perhaps, the ending that would have been the most satisfying, I guess, for the reader, but it is a realistic picture of what Gilman herself endured as a patient of Dr. Mitchell's. At least the reader can take solace to the fact that the narrator is unaware of her own mental state. Her husband seems to have realized how lonesome his actions truly are, and she is finally free from the prison of her solitude. Thank you. Any questions, anybody? Nope? All right. If you do, feel free to email me. Thank you. Have a good day.